Good morning, Vietnam. Well, I'm back again. This is the third vlog on my trilogy on the good, the bad, and the ugly of moving and living in Vietnam for a retiree like myself, and also for people of any age, as I've mentioned a few people in the first two podcasts. I'd like to make a couple of corrections after I've thought about what I've said in the first two. One is I haven't transferred a motorbike into my name for about 6 or 7 years. So I think also it's the same issue with autos, is that you have to have a 1-year visa, and I believe you probably still need to have a company. I'll be transferring my current motorbike to my name soon, and I will somehow send you a message on that. Number two, at the end of my last video, I was getting very angry and I made a statement about Vietnamese not caring about life. That's obviously not true. They do care about life like any other culture. It's just that some of their behavior, especially motorbike and auto driving, makes you doubt it sometimes. I will mention the reasons why I think that is the case in my conclusion. But let me finish with what I believe to be the ugly things about living in Vietnam, which really are extensions of my last podcast, which is the bad things of Vietnam. Again, real estate, it is very, very difficult to, I won't say that difficult, you can buy apartments especially relatively easy. It's the land issue that becomes a problem if you want to retire here and own your own property. That is land. So you cannot own land. That's that. Do I recommend buying an apartment? Unless you have $100,000 to $500,000 spare and you don't mind it being locked up like that, then okay, buy an apartment. Pollution, it is a real issue here. It's one of the one or two biggest problems in Vietnam at the moment. I think it's second after changing the psychology of Vietnamese people. The air quality here, especially in Saigon and in Hanoi, is terrible. You see people wear masks here all the time. And it's not because of COVID. Now, it made life easier during COVID, or I'll say the last 3 years, 4 years, that people wore masks here relatively easily. You didn't have to convince people to wear masks here during COVID, because most people were already wearing them when they were driving outside, especially obviously on motorbikes. Some people even wear them in their automobiles because they don't like the air conditioning in the cars, autos. The pollution of the waterways here is ongoing and continuous because the government and the authorities, especially the police, are really turning a blind eye, and they're not enforcing the rules that are currently on the books. You can obviously prevent getting sick by buying high quality foods, especially almost anything in a supermarket you will not get sick like anywhere in the world. The food quality varies greatly. That's why I don't eat at food stalls. I don't want to get sick at my age. It would take a lot to recover. My immunity is very, very good, but there's no reason to expose it to some sort of microbe disease that I would catch from eating bad quality food. Again, most of the food here comes from the highlands, especially Dalat. If you drive up there or visit there, you will see market gardens there all over the hillsides. So that quality is very good. The water reservoir up there is probably excellent. Drinking water is a problem here. So you should always try to order chada when you're in a restaurant, basically iced tea. Iced tea, the water has already been boiled. I do not buy bottled water here because of the pollution of owning another plastic bottle. I could get a large container delivered here. Many people do. It's a huge industry, as you know, internationally for bottled water. But I decided I would just simply boil the water out of the tap. You're not going to die if you drink tap water almost anywhere in the world. So I boil my water and either chill it or just drink a lot of tea. I drink a lot of green tea in the morning, and in the afternoon I make a different herbal tea. When I work out, and I work out in a gym 3 times a week, I take my own water and keep myself as hydrated as possible. Immigration is the other big issue here for retirees and even non-retirees. The current visa status is 3 months. You have to leave the country every 3 months. What I've heard is the maximum time the government here is allowing you to go in and out of the country is around 8 times. So that's roughly 2 years. Then you're going to have trouble coming back in. Again, the best thing to do is open a company and get a 2-year visa from that. Or work for somebody else. They will get you a TRC and you get the same 2-year visa. So you can live here or, of course, get married, which is a 5-year visa. But every one of these, you have to update them. You have to leave the country. I moved to the US when I was 28 and worked odd jobs. And then about 8 months later, I realized the odd jobs salaries were so low. I went back to being a structural engineer, and I asked the first company I worked for to sponsor me for a green card, which I got less than a year later, and roughly 5 years later, actually it wasn't 5 years, it was 10 years later, around 1990, I applied for citizenship and gave up my Australian citizenship, became a US citizen, and then 1 or 2 years later, excuse me, I read that I can't think of his name, Rupert Murdoch forced the government in the US, or was it Australia? I think he forced the Australian government to have dual citizenships. So I reapplied for my Australian citizenship, so now I have both. It's just more convenient but with either Australian or US citizenships, I can go to either country anytime anyway. So they don't have something like a green card here. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's extremely inconvenient, as I've explained. So we get to, finally, money. One thing I will say about money here: never give anybody any money, and that probably goes wherever you live in the world, but I think more so in Asia. Never give anybody any money unless you consider it as something you're not going to get back. I have been taken advantage of a few times here. If I may say, stupidly, most of it is my fault. If you're going to do an investment with a Vietnamese person, you have to look at it as money that you may not get back. I started a iBusiness shop with the family or the woman who I became first friends with when I visited here. And it was a 50-50 partnership. And about 2 years we had 2 or 3 different locations. They moved the shop without telling me. And then finally they sold the shop without telling me. And then they invested the money. I have no idea where, because they won't tell me. And then they told me they lost all the money. This is just one example. I have more, but I'm quite embarrassed that I've lost money in similar ways. As I said in the last podcast, filing a lawsuit against somebody because it's the only way to try and get my money back. I doubt whether I will. I heard about a lawsuit 5, 6, 7 years ago where an American guy married a Vietnamese woman. He gave her all his money. It's just a lot easier with buying things and apartments, land, buildings here. She disappeared with all his money. When they finally caught her and they went to court, she simply said, "I've lost all the money." And that's the end of that. He lost all his money. So don't give anyone any money. It's as simple as that. When I was living in the US, some friends asked me for small amounts of money, like $1,000. They never returned it. As I said, the cost of living here is very low. The opportunity for 80% of the population to ever make a lot of money is nearly zero. So many people and women are going to offer you silly things like huge investment returns. The chances of it working out, I would say, between 10 and 20%. So if you do that, you give people money, especially girlfriends or even wives, the chances are you will not get that money back. So don't give people money. I don't care how much you think this woman is worth, girlfriend, wife, that will always ask for some money. As I said in my cost of living breakdown, you're going to pay anywhere between $100 a month to $1,000 a month to the woman you're with, no matter what. It just happens that way. Because the people here are very poor. I have dated women here who did not ask me for money, but they are well educated, have good jobs. A lot of women here, I've spoken to many of them who work in the lowest paid jobs, and even some of them who work in the masseuse industry, and also the girls who in the sex industry. Before COVID, they were making a lot of money, but most of that money went back to support their families in their hometowns. And today it's much worse because the economy is, and the number of foreigners coming into the country are nowhere near as much as it was before COVID. So they're not making anywhere near the same money as they were before COVID. So, women, don't give them money, at least the big money. I know I'm going to repeat myself. You don't need to buy an apartment here. The rent here, depending on what you want in the comfort that you want to live in, you can rent a really nice apartment for a few $100s a month. So you don't have to buy anything. If you come here with a few $100,000, excuse me, you're going to live the rest of your life very comfortably. You can start businesses here. There are many foreigners here that are starting small businesses. A good friend of mine started a travel agency to give more for tour guides around the country. They've done, I believe, 3 so far in the last 6 months. But it will eventually grow as they try and get more and more Europeans to have guided tours rather than just coming alone. I personally have never done a guided tour. I've been to 22 countries. I've always enjoyed finding out about a country by myself. But most people don't want that hassle. As I mentioned earlier, another American Vietnamese guy started his own convenience store business and now he's booming. Starbucks is here. There are so many new coffee shops, 1, 2 shops of single person owners. Some get super lucky and they expand. There's one company called the Coffee House. There's a few others that have hundreds and hundreds of coffee shops around the country. I don't know who owns them, but there's no reason why you cannot open a small business here and do very, very well. The Vietnamese have a strong sense of non-violent behavior. Their threshold is very, very high. But once you reach there, then they become violent. It's much higher than the Western countries. There's literally no road rage here. Considering how bad they drive on both motorbikes and in autos, it is really, really amazing. They don't get angry very much at all. but then they will explode. Now, this is really part of their culture. This, I can only postulate, has to do with the being at war for so many years, 100 years. The culture never really developed. It went straight from an agrarian culture into the war mindset, and then straight into capitalism in 1995. A friend of mine said, actually one of my ex-bosses who I work for, an architect, said to me about 6 years ago, we were in a hotel in where we were presenting one of the projects, and the staff were allowing someone to smoke in the restaurant. And I went up to them and said, hey, you can't smoke inside. That's the law, especially in a food establishment. And the guy's, I guess, wife said, well, they have ashtrays on the table. It's like, excuse me? Later, my boss told me that he has to be very, very careful to call somebody out on this type of behavior, because in Vietnam, if you do something like that, call people out on behavior, they take it too personally, and it can easily result in violent behavior. So that's one reason why they don't call out negative behavior here and road rage. Some women have told me here that men have had some road rage against them, and I think it's because they're women and can't fight back anyway, so they can get upset. But I think I've only seen once a road rage incident or guys arguing on the road. Now, one reason why they drive so badly is because for Vietnamese, they think they own everything. And I think it goes back to the three things I just mentioned. Jumping from agrarian to war to a capitalistic economy, they haven't had time to develop other aspects of their psychology, or psychological makeup. And so when they drive, they feel they can drive anywhere on the road. So everyone's aware of this, and you drive accordingly. Of course, I don't drive like them. I just drive normal, and I nearly get hit so many times, and I get really, really upset, as I feel like they're trying to kill me. And this happens at least once if I drive for some time. Like if I drive for 30 minutes, it will probably happen once. They feel like they are not responsible for anything. They have this self-centered mentality. And I experienced that a little bit when I went to China a few times with my girlfriend, Chinese girlfriend. But it seems here that this self-centered mentality makes them behave like they're not responsible for anything. And it's like when the police, if there's an accident, the police will come, if it's a bad accident, the police will come and apportion blame to everybody, even though one person created the whole problem because of their really, really bad driving. Because they don't want people to get upset. They don't want one person to take the blame for everything. So when something goes wrong, it looks like their thinking is it's just bad luck. Well, we just had a motorbike accident. Well, bad luck. You broke your leg. Oh, bad luck. No one ever says, or I've never heard it or discussed, with my girlfriend, it's my fault. It's your fault. It's just bad luck. Things happen. Life is bad luck. You don't make money, oh, it's just bad luck. Life centers around how lucky you are, not how hard you work, or how lazy you are, or you sit in coffee shops all day. Oh, I don't make enough money because it's just bad luck. And everything I've just talked about is that things cannot be prevented, like the motorbike accidents. It's just bad luck, I wasn't really thinking too much about anything, but no one talks about preventing anything. Like not driving down the wrong side of the road at speed, not cutting you off continuously. And I mean that all the time. They will cut you off one way or another. And a lot of guys especially drive around bikes that they could never stop on time. My bike is disc brakes front and back, has ABS, and that's why I have it. It'll stop. These guys drive older bikes. The front brake, even though it might be a disc brake, almost every older bike I've ever owned, I've always had to fix the front brake. They never use them. I think it has to do with they're just scared that they will lock the front brake and skid and drop the bike, so they only use the rear brake. And of course, most of the bikes here have drum rear brakes. You can see them, they drive around with their foot on the brake all the time, not activated, but waiting to use it to slow down or stop. And finally, out of sight, out of mind. I've mentioned before, there's this great photo of this middle-aged woman who collects trash, and she has a small portable container bin on wheels that she's filled up with trash, maybe half a cubic meter. And the photo is showing her on a pier, and she's emptying all the trash in the ocean. While driving, I've hit the horn a few times at people who throw things when they're on motorbikes or out of windows of cars, and try and express to them that it's not the right behaviour to throw trash on the street. There's a place just down the road from me where people stop and have lunch or have a drink, and the government comes and cleans it. It's like 100 metres long, and there's trees there, and so people sit in there, especially vehicles, autos, and eat or drink and then throw the trash out the window. Every few months the government comes and cleans it all up. A few days later it's all back. Even in my apartment, if there's some item that's fallen on the floor here, I'm talking small item, she won't pick it up until we clean the house, which is apartment twice a week. that would stay there until we cleaned the house, apartment. All that being said, Vietnam is one of the top 3 decisions. Moving to Vietnam is one of the top 3 decisions I've made in my life. I've met some fantastic people, very warm, very caring. They've taken care of me in many ways. In working, especially, actually all the jobs I've had here, the 2 paying jobs and the few non-paying, the people really trust you and believe in you first. My first job was for a Singaporean architectural firm. I mean, he saw my CV on the internet and hired me. I really wasn't qualified for the job. Most of my work in America, LA area, was on single family dwellings, not high rise. But he hired me anyway, and due to my diligence, experience, intelligence, I did the job extremely well. But because of staff issues, he let me go after a few months. One of my non-paying jobs was with this small architectural firm, and we were doing some interior design for a very large villa in Phan Thiet, a city about 200k north of here, I've mentioned. And I saw they were struggling with the interior design, and I told my boss, hey, let me take care of it. I'll design all the interiors for the villa. And it turned out really, really good. I ended up doing some consulting work for that owner later, a couple of years later. We did have help with an interior designer, but I still had to correct some of her designs. Half the designs were mine, and I was really, really pleased the way it worked out. And then for this particular architectural firm, I did a lot of, as I mentioned before, large projects, concept designs, especially resorts. And the last paid job I had was for a real estate developer, and I wrote a couple of reports. One was, what are the minimum requirements for an apartment building to become a medium to high-end apartment building rather than a medium to low-end apartment building, which is what this company was building. And especially the last thing I did there was design a high-rise building, design the facade, a lot of the apartments inside. And the third major thing I did with the company over only a few months was I was in charge of, they wanted to design and build a Formula One racing track. Being a car buff and watched many Formula One races, I then did a lot of research and was in contact with a British firm who have never designed a Formula One track, but have done GP, the equivalent motorbike for Formula One. They've designed a couple of tracks for them, and we worked closely together to refine a design they already had from a Vietnamese company. So I learned a lot and did a lot of the recommendations on the Formula One track. this couldn't happen almost anywhere in the world, in any country, where someone like myself, even though I have a degree in structural engineering, did some architectural work on single-family dwellings in LA, and then come to Vietnam, do so many concept designs for resorts, high-rise buildings, worked on the design of a Formula One racetrack. I mean, where can that happen in the world? I am so grateful to be living here. And then I moved here over 10 years ago. I cannot imagine how much better off I would have been if I had to come here even 5 years earlier. So, to the people in the country here, even though it's a so-called communist country, and when you watch, I remember the politics in Australia back in the late 60s, early 70s, about the fear of communism, the fear of the yellow peril of China sweeping down through Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and taking over Australia. There was so much fear. And of course, John Howard used, and of course, many right-wing politicians around the world use fear in some way or another to get themselves re-elected. John Howard in Australia in the 2000s, he used the migrant fear. They're coming on the boats, they're going to take over the whole country. A few thousand migrants are going to take over the country. So I remember clearly in that time when I was in high school, the propaganda about the yellow peril. Vietnamese economy is based on capitalism. That's it. The government has very, very little to do with it. And in fact, probably has less control of the economy than Western countries. So if you're planning to move here, I highly, highly recommend it. The economy is going to keep growing for 10 to 20, 30 years, I think. It can only get better here for that period. I'll probably live here for that time. So, thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you follow me in my next few podcasts. It's going to be about health, food, exercise, psychology, trauma, and hopefully we all live better lives. Take care and thank you so much.